Now, President Trump is blaming everybody else for the pair of terrible mass shootings that took place over the weekend. So now what happened, of course, is that a gunman had killed 20 people and wounded dozens more in an attack at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. Now, less than a day later, on Sunday, 9 people were killed and more than 2 dozen were injured in a shooting in Dayton, Ohio. Not Toledo. Just letting you know that. It's not Toledo. The El Paso shooter, named Patrick Wood Crucis, specifically targeted a place where there was a high concentration of Hispanic people and had previously written a racist anti-immigrant manifesto prior to the attack, which described fears of a Latino-led invasion. Now, where have we heard that rhetoric before? But wait. Now, of course, Trump says, what are you talking about? Invasion? No. It doesn't have anything to do with the rhetoric. In fact, it has to do with social media. It's got to do with the internet. It's got the guns. Or not guns, sorry. Anything but the guns. No, don't even talk about that. No, it's not white supremacy. It's nothing like that. In fact, here's who he went after in his speech. He said, the perils of the internet and social media cannot be ignored and will not be ignored. He then directed social media companies to, quote, develop tools to identify mass shooters before they strike. Well, now, wait a minute here. My question is, why is it Twitter's job to do that? Why is it Facebook's job to profile people and find people that are, going to do a mass shooting, that they think they're going to do a mass shooting? How's that their job? We have something called an FBI, which, by the way, they have already pointed out, and I did this story a few days ago, last week. They said, look, if you're a white supremacist and you believe in some of these conspiracy theories, you are dangerous to this country. You are more likely to perpetrate an attack on fellow Americans. It is those conspiracy theories, things like QAnon, as well as, Pizzagate, as well as people that believe in the replacement theory, which apparently this shooter did. He believed that immigrants were coming over and trying to replace Americans to what end? I don't know. Destroy white people? I don't know. Right? These conspiracy theories, the FBI says, look, they're dangerous. This is the biggest danger facing this country is white right-wing terrorism that is, prefaced on the belief in these conspiracy theories. So maybe we need to focus on doing something like that. Now, the Trump administration says, what? No, Muslims. There were no Muslims in these attacks. These were both white kids, young white males that are right-wing. One was a fan of yours. And the other, I believe, was somebody who was bullied, whatever, maybe possibly an incel. I don't know. So there are some significant issues here that he is not addressing when he attacks social media. Now, here's the thing. He also continued by claiming that we live in a culture that glorifies violence. Oh, no, but glorifies violence. Oh, like when the president retweets a GIF of him body slamming CNN or somebody with the CNN logo on their head. Or how about a more real instance, right? Because, of course, you could make the argument, well, that's wrestling, they're, whatever. Well, do you guys remember Greg Gianforte? He was somebody who won an election in Montana. Right before he won his election, he body slammed a reporter. You know what Donald Trump said to that? Oh, it's my kind of guy. My kind of guy. Oh, no, glorifying violence. How? No, this culture glorifies violence. Well, yeah, you glorify violence. But then, of course, he ignores all that and says, you know what the real problem here, or one of the real problems is, along with this, all the other stuff we mentioned in the video games, fake news. It's fake news media's fault. He said, quote, fake news has contributed greatly to the anger and rage that has built up over many years. News coverage has got to start being fair, balanced, and unbiased, or these terrible problems will only get worse. the fake news media. A totally biased coverage against me, by the way. And he is always the victim of this supposed super unfair media coverage, right? They're mean to me. That's why there are shootings. Well, I guess in a way that he's right, because what President Trump is doing is saying, oh, to his fans, some of which are very well armed, some of which are unhinged, and some of which are just violent white supremacists, he's saying, well, these guys are the worst. They're the enemies. They're trying to take me down. They're trying to destroy us. Maybe somebody ought to do something about that. And you know what they call that? They call that stochastic terrorism. But hey, look, he's not wrong when he says fake news does contribute to the problem. I totally agree. Which is why you can point a finger at Fox News and right-wing media. Look, you've got people on Fox News like Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson. They're warning and giving legitimacy to the so-called white replacement conspiracy theory, right? That white people will be replaced by minorities, and they even call it white genocide. That is a massive white supremacist talking point. They talk about it on Fox News all the time. And you have Donald Trump that retweets these hosts. He even took Tucker Carlson along with him to a trip. I mean, how much of a symbiotically, gross relationship do they have? So he legitimizes these talking points, this network and these hosts. And why? It's because I've said it before. He's the Fox News president. He is what happens when you take a regular viewer who is engrossed in Fox News and you put him in a position of power. This is what happens. This is what happens. So then he goes and also blames mental health. He said, quote, mental illness and hatred pull the trigger, not the gun. Interesting how he talks about triggers then, right? So now on Sunday, he also said this, quote, this is also a mental illness problem. If you look at both of these cases, this is mental illness. These are people that are very, very seriously mentally ill. So a lot of things are happening. A lot of things are happening right now. No, really? A lot of things are happening right now? Really? But of course, that's just me nitpicking about that because that's just nonsense filler that you get from Donald Trump and his gigantic word salads, right? But the issue is, he says, well, it's mental illness. It's got to be mental illness. So is it? Is it? Well, let's take a look. In the document, the suspect in El Paso had referred to Hispanic people as, quote, invaders, and had used a rhetoric that we had heard at Trump rallies before of send them back. Now, of course, the crowd at one of Donald Trump's recent rallies, said send her back in response to Ilhan Omar, who's a Somali refugee, right, who is now an American citizen and a congresswoman. Send her back, send her back. Well, in this case, they're saying send them back. And there's also been talk about him saying that the entire squad, people like AOC, should also be sent back to their countries. In fact, he told them, why don't you go fix the countries you came from? 3 of them are American citizens. All of them are American citizens. 3 here were born here in this country. They're American as anybody else, but you don't see it that way because, oh, well, they're brown or they're black or they're Somali or they're Muslim. You can't possibly be a good American if you're any one of those. That's the mindset of people like Donald Trump. But back to the mental illness part of that. So is believing in a invasion from Latinos and being virulently racist, is that a mental illness issue? Unless you're considering racism to be mental illness, which I guess you could make an argument for, that would mean that there's a lot of people in the Republican Party, in the Republican base, that are literally mentally ill under that definition. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So now here's the other thing. He says he wants background check legislation, right? In fact, in a tweet, he tweeted out earlier, and this is going to irritate you even more. He said, Republicans and Democrats must come together and get a strong background checks, perhaps marrying this legislation with desperately needed immigration reform. We must have something good, if not great, come out of these 2 tragic events. Now, Republicans always talk about politicizing a tragedy. That right there would be the definition. But hey, you know what? If you want something strong on background checks, great news. House already passed two pieces of legislation, two bills, that would do enhanced background checks. Now, one of them, of course, involved doing background checks for private sellers, the so-called gun show loophole, right? So people who are private sellers are not, specifically, don't necessarily have to do a background check in order to make a gun sale, which, of course, all non-private dealers do have to do these background checks. So it's kind of a way to get through that and how some people who aren't supposed to have a gun actually end up getting a gun, right? So now what was Trump's response to this? Well, to these two pieces of legislation, President Trump did not welcome this and instead threatened a presidential veto. So why tweet this out then? If he's already said, I'm against this legislation, and Republicans are against this legislation because they think, oh no, you're going to hurt actual people who believe in the Second Amendment who aren't actual criminals. I don't see how anybody who isn't who's actually one of those so-called good gun owners, how are they affected at all by background checks? Maybe they have to wait a couple of days in order to get their gun instead of getting their gun right now. Well, why the hurry? Look, I get waiting for a package to come, right? Like, I sit by the door and I'm like, come on, UPS or FedEx or whatever. Like, I want my stuff. But it's not because, it's not the same as a gun, right? Yes, you might want your gun faster, but why is that? I'm kind of curious as to why people need guns right this second, instead of being able to wait for a background check that it's going to come out clean. But here's the thing. Why is he tweeting this out? Why is he making this suggestion, right? Oh, we'll do, background checks. We'll do something about guns if you give me what I want on immigration. Well, it's because he's using a tragedy to get what he wants. Hey, I might get money from my wall, or I might get whatever I want for immigration if I give the Democrats background checks. This is gross. He's a disgusting person. And that's the problem here, right? Now, here's the thing. Look, all the stuff that he's been talking about is nothing but distractions. They're talking points, and they don't actually address the real issues of white supremacy and easy access to weapons. White supremacy and guns. That's what was behind these attacks. Donald Trump and his rhetoric and Fox News fed into this. And so that's the problem, right? I mean, the Dayton shooter had a 100-round drum. Perfectly legal for him to buy. That means he could sit there and shoot and shoot and shoot as fast as he could. That is a far cry from the single-shot rifle that the founding fathers envisioned. Far from it. So we do need to do something about this high-powered weaponry with, endless magazines or near endless magazines where you can do a ton of damage. By the way, the Dayton shooter was killed within seconds, right? He still managed to kill 9 people and injure over 20 in the blink of an eye. So that's the problem that we face, and we need to do something about it. So let's actually talk about the real issues. Let's talk about the fomenting white supremacy in this country. Let's talk about access to, high-powered weaponry and in huge, large magazines. Let's talk about those issues and actually do something about it. Because if you're not, and if you're only using this in order to get something that you want and literally politicizing a tragedy, well, then you're a super gross person. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.